Okay, hello and welcome to the Draft Brothers Champions Round podcast. If you like sports and playing sporting games, make sure you download the Champions Round app. Get playing and start winning. I am your host, Jeff Hasley, and I'm joined by my draft brother, Dan Turner. And this week we have an esteemed guest. Kevin Hickey joins us. Kevin is the managing editor of the Colts Wire, a prominent addition to the NFL Wire network. And Kevin is all things Colts. And today we're going to pick his brain and discuss the Colts' plans for the NFL draft, including what rumors he's heard and what he thinks is going to happen. So, Kevin, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
I appreciate it, fellas. Thanks for having me on.
So, one thing that I wanted to mention here first is just the fact that the draft is completely dependent on whatever the heck Chicago decides to do at 1, I think. And there's a lot of talk about the Colts potentially moving up. They have the 4th pick in the draft. Do you think, Kevin, that they stay at 4? Do they move up? What are you hearing? And who might they be targeting?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting situation for them. Being at 4, you're close to moving up to number 1 if you really have a guy that you really, really want, above everybody else. So it's not like you have to move heaven and earth to get that deal done. And there's actually a really close relationship between the Colts and the Bears. Matt Eberflus, the head coach, he was the Colts defensive coordinator for 4 seasons before he took on the head coach role in Chicago. And Ryan Poles, the GM, he has a history with Chris Ballard. So they have connections. So a deal could easily get done. It's just a matter of, do the Colts feel it's worth moving up for their quarterback? And, I know we'll get into it a little bit later, but the quarterback is what they're going to have to get. There should be no consideration for any other position except for one of the quarterbacks at the top of the board. So, it really comes down to, is there a guy that has really separated himself throughout the process in the coming months to the point where they're willing to, pay up and go move up for him? My ultimate prediction, it's tough this early, but I could definitely see them moving up, but I think they're going to stay put. I think, like I said, unless there's a guy that really, really separates himself from the pack, I think Chris Ballard's going to kind of want to sit back and see how it unfolds and then make a move. Like he could very well wait until draft night to make his move if he does make a move, or just see where the chips fall and see, maybe only 1 or 2 quarterbacks go, and now you're sitting at 4 with, a couple of the top 4 prospects still sitting there. So, I think it's definitely possible, but if I had to make a prediction, I think they stay there. I think they try to keep as many picks as they can because they like to build through the draft and then really build that roster, that offense around whoever the new quarterback's going to be.
So there's been some talk that Indianapolis is interested in Will Levis. And there's been even speculation of them moving up to take him, which seems maybe that might not be the right way to go because he might be there at 4. What have you heard about Will Levis and about the Colts? They're kind of keeping things tight to their vest, aren't they, about this? But let's get your thoughts on Will Levis, what you think about him and other quarterbacks as well. You've got CJ Stroud, of course, Bryce Young, who would also be in line as a potential draft pick for Indianapolis. So what's your take on Levis and also the other quarterbacks?
Yeah, I could definitely see Levis being a guy that they like. They're very big on intangibles. They're very big on character and leadership. So like right off the bat, I could definitely see Levis, however you say it. I could definitely see him being, checking off those boxes because they really do. They a lot, teams are going to say that, but the Colts really do keep that in like high regard when it comes to character. So, I think the thing with Levis is that you're betting on his traits, right? He's a big dude. He moves well for his size. He has a cannon for an arm. He can make all the throws. So if you're considering taking him, you're betting on the fact that, okay, he has these kind of like unteachable traits, and then we kind of mold him into what we want as a quarterback. So, with him, I think a big thing that you're going to have to focus on is getting his lower half mechanics more consistent. I feel like those kind of get a little lazy. They get a little, out of whack sometimes, especially when he's under pressure. So, that leads to a lot of turnover worthy throws, a lot of dumb decisions. Sometimes he tries to fit a ball where it shouldn't be, or if it's just a tight window and, his mechanics aren't all the way there, and it kind of leads to either a deflection or a turnover. So, I think those are the issues that you're going to have to deal with, and that's okay. That's fine. But you have to have a plan to develop him, and you have to have the right coach to develop him too. I think that's a big thing right now. We don't know who the coach is. As of Wednesday night, we don't know who the head coach is. And whoever that is, that's going to dictate what kind of quarterback they go after. I know Chris Ballard probably has, a blueprint of the kind of quarterback he wants. But if you get a quarterback that's not going to mesh well with, say you go after a guy like, say you take, I don't know, Raheem Morris, who might, maybe he meshes well better with a pocket passer, but then you go and draft Anthony Richardson. It might not work, right? Because that might not be the quarterback that he wants to develop. So, I think with Levis, it's really going to come down to, can you get his mechanics and his decision-making up to speed with his other intangible traits, like his arm, like his leadership. Those are pluses, and that's going to be his biggest selling point. But I think when it comes down to that, you're going to have to really have a plan to develop his mechanics. And it goes, without saying for the other guys too. I mean, CJ Stroud's, in my opinion, CJ Stroud's probably going to be at the top of their board. I think Stroud is the guy that they're going to want when it all comes down to it. I think he's a good leader. I think he has all of the traits that they want. He doesn't have an elite arm, but he can make all the throws that you need to make. He works very well in a timing rhythm offense. Really does well with anticipatory throws. Has excellent pocket awareness. He can really manipulate the pocket and move around pressure. The biggest issue with him is you're probably not going to get a whole lot out of structure. And today's game, that's pretty big. You really want your quarterback to be able to kind of, have those little Houdini acts if you can. So, that's going to be an area where, you're probably going to have to focus a lot more on the offensive line, something, that they really struggled with this year. So, but I could really see Stroud being at the top of their list, especially if they go with a guy like Brian Callahan as their head coach. He's had history with Joe Burrow and, a bunch of other guys. I'm pretty sure Callahan was the one. Callahan was with Burrow, Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr, worked with Peyton a little bit, Peyton Manning in Denver.
Yeah.
I think he was just an offensive assistant, but he, Callahan's gotten a lot of praise from Peyton Manning. That's going to carry a lot of weight when it comes to Jim Irsay making his decision. But, Bryce Young's another guy. He's just electric. It's just, he does everything that you want. It's just, can you get over the size concerns? If he winds up measuring in at 5'10", 185, do you really want to take that chance on an outlier? So, another guy, Anthony Richardson. I think Richardson probably has the highest ceiling, but he's definitely the biggest risk. He has a lot of work to do with his lower half mechanics. And the good thing about that is the Colts have a good relationship with 3D QB. It's like I don't know if it's a school. It's like a biomechanics program out in California with Adam Dado, I think is how you say it, and Tom House. Both have baseball backgrounds, but they've really honed in their ability to help quarterbacks with their throwing motions, with their mechanics, running them through drills, getting them to really open their hips to their targets and get them, working consistently with good mechanics. So whichever quarterback you get, they're definitely going to be working with those guys because the Colts have had all their quarterbacks do that. So, I think each one of them has their question marks, but, if you had to ask me, I'd say probably Stroud is at the top of their list.
And, you mentioned Tom House. That's a name that I'm familiar with. I'm not familiar with the other one, but it sounds like they have their ducks in a row in terms of what they want, how they can work on determining, which quarterback it is that they want to target. Dan, I want to get you involved here. Let's say you're Chris Ballard.
All right.
Okay. Are you moving up to number 1, or are you standing pat at number 4? What would you do? Do you want to mortgage the future, which would include your first round pick, second round pick, third round pick, and maybe next year's first to move up? Do you do that? the way the Colts' current landscape is right now, man, I just don't know if I could do that. If I'm Chris Ballard, though, if you want your guy, you got to spend to get him. So you're Chris Ballard. What would you do, Dan?
I think I'm going to stay put. I think that the price to move up is going to be too much to mortgage the future for where the Colts are as a franchise right now. I'd say if like they were one piece away, I might make that move.
Right.
But I mean, they're pretty much going to have to, not start over, but get a couple of good foundational pieces in the next couple of drafts to get where they want to go. And then, in the last couple of years, they really haven't had first round picks to spend. So I think that the discrepancy in where you can get at one, whether it's CJ Stroud or Young or whoever they have on the top of their board, and someone like a Levis or Richardson at a 4, if that's where they go, I think the difference isn't so much where it would justify the cost of going up there.
Yeah, I kind of think that that's what's going to happen. And the absolute worst case scenario, if you're a Chicago Bears fan, is that no one wants to trade up to number 1 and spend those picks. And then Chicago's left making their decision, probably taking Jalen Carter or Will Anderson at number 1. And then, of course, then the quarterbacks move down some. But, wow, so much to digest with the NFL draft, with the quarterbacks, with teams jockeying up into position to get the guy that they want. Do you make the move to, trade up? Whew. All right, so I want to get back to you here, Kevin. Non-quarterbacks, and I'm not saying this first round because I think first round's a quarterback, right? I think we can all agree that with that. But non-quarterbacks, next second round pick, who is it that you're targeting? Who do you like? What do you think they might do, or what have you heard?
Yeah, so assuming they don't move up and they keep that second round pick, I think it's at 35 right now because of the Dolphins forfeiting their first round pick. So assuming they stay there, there's a lot of holes. I mean, they have a decent roster. They have good players, but you still got a lot of holes to fill. I mean, right now the offensive line, I would say, is that the interior is probably their biggest need. So it wouldn't surprise me if they use their second or third round pick on, someone who can fill in at right guard or center. Someone like Osiris Torrance from Florida. He's a guy that kind of fits that like mauling right guard, run blocker, has those athletic traits that you want to develop. He's really got a mean streak, and that's something that the Colts really need. They need that back. When they first drafted Quentin Nelson, it was nice because he brought this kind of like injection of like anger and like mean streak that really gave the Colts offensive line an edge. And I feel like they've kind of lost that in the last couple of years, because even in 2021, they were a decent unit, but they weren't as dominant as we had seen in the years prior. So, I think that's, Torrance is probably a guy the center out of Minnesota. I forget his middle name. I think it's John Mitchell Schmitz or something like that. He's one of the Senior Bowl winners. Michael. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Yeah. He's a guy that I think the Colts are really going to think highly of. He moves well. He's a really good center, really good pass protector. So, you have Ryan Kelly, but he's starting to get towards the twilight of his career. He's starting to get a little more expensive compared to the production that they're getting at the center position. So do you consider moving him to right guard? Do you consider trading him, trying to save some of that cap money and see what you can get out of a rookie center? So then, then you kind of shift your focus to, okay, they probably need a little bit more depth at edge rusher. They got 2 young guys, Kwity Paye, who was their first round pick, 2021, Dio Dengbo, who was their second round pick in 2021, but they had a first round grade on Dio. So, but he was coming off a torn Achilles that he suffered during, I think it was like January of that offseason. So, you got 2 pretty good edge rushers, guys that kind of project to be ascending. So I think they want to keep Gus Bradley as defensive coordinator. And if they do, you're going to have to fill that Leo edge rusher spot, which is kind of like a bendy, guy with juice, not necessarily like your big bulky DN, but a guy that can really, run the arc with a lot of bend and work from like the wide 9, stuff like that. Really just be a pass rusher. Just really like his only job is get after the quarterback. And that's what Yannick Ngakoue did this last year. That was his role. had 9.5 sacks. I don't know if you're going to re-sign him. If he commands 12.5 to 15 million, I think that's going to be too steep for the Colts. I think they'd rather just, go to the draft, get a guy like Will McDonald out of Iowa State. He's a guy with a lot of juice, a lot of bend, good length. They have with their defensive end prospects, they like to, it's like they have a weird threshold where they have to have 33-inch arms. It's like every defensive end that they've drafted over the last 5 years have had 33-inch arms. It's super weird, but they really emphasize length and burst. So, guys like that, guys like Derek Hall out of Auburn, and then you also need to add some depth to the cornerback position. If you do make a trade, I think, with the Bears, I think one of the guys that will probably be prominently featured in those talks would be Kenny Moore. He's their slot cornerback, but he's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. And when they brought Gus Bradley in as the defensive coordinator, Kenny Moore didn't really mesh all that well with the new system. I don't know if it was just too much responsibility. I don't know if, they didn't really see eye to eye on what role he was supposed to play. But he had kind of like a soft holdout last offseason. He's got one more year on his contract with no dead money, so you could trade him away with no penalty at all. So I could see, if they trade him away, that's one of your starting cornerbacks that you're now missing. Now you talk about, okay, probably need to draft his replacement. Look at a guy like Jalen Jones at a Texas A&M, lengthy guy, physical, probably better in zone, but can play a little bit of man on the outside if you need him to. Guys like that. I mean, I don't think they spend a first-round pick on a cornerback if they don't go quarterback, but definitely think it's a position to watch for them later in the draft. And then, I also like their wide receiver core, but if you get to that second round and Jalen Hyatt's there, I mean, that's a nice vertical slot, guy that you can plug in there if you don't re-sign Paris Campbell, especially for a young quarterback if you don't move up. I think I like Josh Downs, but I think he's going to be too small. The Colts are, they like their wide receivers to be, 6 foot, have a little bit of weight on them. But he's a really good prospect, and he's somebody I would be interested in. I don't think Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to fall to the second round, but it's the draft. You never know. He's a guy that you would definitely have to consider, especially if you take Stroud. That connection right there could be huge. So yeah, I mean, those are the guys that right now, we're pretty early in the process, but I know I'm rambling a little bit, so I apologize. But
no, it's great.
Those are the guys that I would probably target for the Colts.
There's definitely options. You already mentioned the offensive line. You talked a little bit about defense and, of course, wide receiver. We're talking about the second round pick. But I just think that, the consensus, all three of us, we think that they're going to stay put at 4. And that's really going to be a telling sign of how this draft might unfold here in the top 10 or the top 5 even, right? So
yeah,
very interesting.
I think history has probably shown us that if a trade does happen, it's going to happen before the draft, especially with these early picks. Like I know a couple years ago when they traded back with the Jets from 3 to 6 in 2018, I think it happened somewhere in March. The 49ers, when they moved up for Trey Lance, that happened before, I think a month before the draft maybe. So hopefully we know, and it's not like a draft night kind of thing, but I think
getting their coach will kind of put things in order too, as well. Yeah. And, once they have that, then they can start to make their decision-making process kind of come alive a little bit. Right. So
yeah,
lots of options, but it's great talking about Colts here because they are a key team as we try to figure out how this draft unravels. Dan, anything else you wanted to mention to Kevin? Or ask him?
Yeah, I did actually have one question. If you do trade up with the Bears, if we all agree you shouldn't, which would you prefer giving away, a second round pick or Michael Pittman?
Yeah, see, this is a good question because I really like Michael Pittman. I don't know. It's so tough.
I know, man.
Because there's a lot of factors. Right? Yeah, there's a lot of factors because Pittman right now, he's unquestionably your number one, right? Guy was one catch shy of being the youngest player in Colts history to have 100 catches in a season. Had they gotten him one more catch, he would have been the youngest player to do that. So he's been productive. he is the guy that they want. He's the type of receiver that they want, especially like mentality wise. Like he's just a bully. So, but you're also talking about, is he more of a 1B kind of player? Is he really that legit, wide receiver one that can be that stud that you need, that can be a perennial 1,200 yard guy? I don't know. I think he could if you get the quarterback position right, but that means you're going to have to pay him $20 million, more than $20 million a year. So, he's going into the last year of his contract. So yeah, I mean, if you have a wide receiver that you really like and you really think he's going to be there at 35, sit back at 4 or trade up and to 1, get your quarterback. And then if you can wiggle your way into keeping the second round pick, go ahead and take a wide receiver there. But that's when I keep going back and forth on, because it makes sense both ways, because you need a guy to
those
lead
are like one of those
Pete.
decisions. I'm sorry. Those are one of those decisions that you hear about when the GM has an interview later on and he's like, I had this right here and I was waiting to pull the trigger on it and I didn't, right? And then Michael Pittman turns into a Hall of Famer, right? Or,
Right.
whatever. I mean, plus we're also seeing Pittman with sunset Phillip Rivers and sunset Matt Ryan in terms of their careers, right? So we haven't really seen him with like a good, strong, capable, up and coming quarterback. We haven't. Right. So man, that's a catch-22 right there.
That's a great question. And it's like, I don't know. I don't have a good answer. Like I could see them doing either one, but I know
Chicago would definitely like a wide receiver. I mean, they absolutely would.
If you can sit back at 4 and you take CJ Stroud and you still have Michael Pittman, that's huge. I mean, because they're both very good on timing routes, and Michael Pittman Jr., he's not like super fast guy, but he's very physical with the ball in his hands. So he can rack up some yards after catch. And I think that's where they would mesh really well. So it's like, but you also, you're going to have to pay him if you want to keep him. And the way wide receiver contracts are, the way they're like trending, it's like, you're going to have to overpay. And that is one thing Chris Ballard will not do, is overpay.
If you reach 90 catches or more, your dollar signs are going off in your head, or at least your agent is telling you this.
Yeah.
I mean, you're now worth this.
I think so. 2021, when he was with Carson Wentz, I think he had 88 catches for like 1,082 yards. This last year with the combination of Matt Ryan's corpse, Sam Ellinger, and Nick Foles, he had 99 catches. I mean, it's ridiculous. So, he's definitely productive, and he's definitely shown that he can be the leader of the wide receiver room. What does his ceiling look like? That's what you kind of have to debate. But, it's I wish I could give you an answer. I wish I was like firm in my decision on that, but I have no idea what they're going to do with Michael Pittman.
That's fine.
Well, guys, we have gone over our time here, but this is awesome content, and we definitely appreciate everything that we're learning here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and thank you, Kevin, for sharing your thoughts and your opinions, of course. We appreciate your support. Those of you who are watching, please do us a favor. If you like the show, give us a like, subscribe, a comment, all that good stuff that helps us crush the algorithm. So thanks for that. Download the Champions Round app. And, if you like to play those sports games, we've got a code for you right there at the bottom of the screen that says Draft Bros. Use that, get a $10 bonus, and definitely try it out. Try out the games that we have at Champions Round. Awesome. All right. Well, guys, stay tuned next week. We're going to do a full breakdown of the top quarterbacks in the draft. We're going to have our guest, John Lobb of Football Diehards, as we continue our preparation for the NFL draft. Thanks so much, Kevin, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Kev.